Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Sunny Strasberg, and this is the 2025 Psychedelic Assisted Therapy Global Summit. I'm super excited to be here with you, Melissa. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been watching this conference for years, and so it's super, super amazing to just be a part of it now and be able to contribute.
Amazing. I'm going to go ahead and read Melissa's bio right now. Melissa Stengel is a founding partner and COO of Soltara Healing Center, an ayahuasca retreat center in Costa Rica that partners with Shipibo leaders in the Peruvian Amazon. She serves on the advisory board of the Elected Leaders Collective and is a key collaborator in cross-organizational efforts advancing ethics and safety in psychedelic-assisted care. With a background in biomedical engineering from the University of Pennsylvania, Melissa spent years conducting brain and lung cancer research before transitioning into the field of psychedelic healing. In 2015, she began working directly with indigenous communities in the Amazon, later co-founding Soltara to support trauma-informed, culturally respectful healing experiences rooted in both scientific understanding and traditional wisdom. Her work emphasizes preparation, integration, reciprocity, and community building. And she is actively involved in developing a national alliance of ayahuasca centers in Costa Rica to implement frameworks for ethical standards, scientific research, education, and political advocacy. Melissa's work has been featured in publications such as Psychology Today, Forbes, and Rolling Stone, and she regularly speaks on topics related to psychedelic healing, cross-cultural collaboration, and ethical entrepreneurship. Thanks, Melissa. So excited to dive in.
Me too. Thank you so much.
We were just discussing before we started, we both have connections in Costa Rica, and my property is not very far from where you're operating in at Holos. So what an amazing synchronicity that we have in common.
Yeah, you'll have to come for a community ceremony at some point. Love to have you in person.
Absolutely. I would love to. Okay, so let's dive in, okay? I'm so curious about your journey that changed everything. So let's begin by talking about personal moments. You made this remarkable transition from biomedical engineering and cancer research into the world of indigenous plant medicines. That's a big shift. Was there a pivotal experience, maybe during your first retreat or an encounter with ayahuasca that catalyzed this path for you?
Yeah, thank you so much. I often do say that the plants recruited me because it is very much a tangential point in my life. In my former life, I was very interested in the biomedical side of biomedical engineering. And as you mentioned, through that work, I did several years of cancer research and using nanoparticles to help identify and selectively target brain cancer cells. And it was for me this curiosity of what could go wrong in the body with these cancer cells and how could we fix it with the tools and the technology that we had available. And so I always had this passion for healing, but there was definitely something for me in the STEM field that felt like it was missing, that the reductionist and Western medical approach, while incredibly effective for certain illnesses like infection or acute trauma, was maybe not so effective for complex diseases or diagnoses like cancer or autoimmune or chronic or mental illnesses. And so while the research and work that I did in that field was really interesting and in certain ways effective, for me, it was also very slow progress within the Western institutionalized medical research. And there was a part of me that felt like there was more to the picture than that particular framework could support. And so to clarify, I'm not saying that science is at odds with spiritual, indigenous, or holistic approaches. In fact, I think they're incredibly complementary. And the path of my life has since been really seeking ways to kind of bridge these worlds, and as is the path of many other speakers at this conference and in this field. So I didn't know it at the time, but looking back, it was that underlying sense of something being missing that really caused me to leave the relatively slow-moving pace of the medical research world. So I decided to get some experience in the corporate world, also because of the burden of debt from attending UPenn was quite crushing, and I needed to make a more sustainable wage. But before I started my corporate job, I was searching for something to help me reorient to this next chapter. And to be honest, I don't even know how I landed on this page, but I found a Reddit post from my, at the time, future and now former business partner, sharing that he takes people to Peru for ayahuasca ceremonies with Shipibo healers and ask him anything. And I was like, oh, I have a lot of questions. So I started asking him questions and he answered, and I got a really just good feeling about it. And he was, at the time, this was back in 2013, he was advertising for a June solstice journey to work with ayahuasca. And it happened synchronistically to line up perfectly with ending my research and beginning my corporate job. I had a break in June. So, in that moment, I was like, oh, I think actually, I think I feel like this is the right thing. I had just this intuition that it was a good idea. And, at the time, there wasn't nearly as much prevalence in media and kind of in the mainstream world about ayahuasca. And so my partner at the time was very concerned that I was going to go do drugs in the jungle with some guy I met on Reddit. And, I was like, I don't know. I have a good feeling about it. And he was like, oh, cool. You have a good feeling about it. Like, I'll never see you again. Right. And I was like, no, I think I'm going to do this. Like, if you're so nervous, come with me. Let's do it together. And so he did. And we went, and it was certainly not without its Peruvian adventures. Our bus got stuck in the mud, and we actually had to have a 12-year-old with a boat take us to the first ceremony, getting there like an hour before the first ceremony. But we did it. And for me, it wasn't really this like hugely catalyzing breakthrough experience, but it really planted a seed and it opened a door for me. And at the end of that experience, where I just was able to really connect to gratitude and love for all the people in my life, and really truly reorient to the love that I had in my field at the time, I was like, I have to go take this job, but I love what you're doing. Let's keep in touch. And over the next 2 years, I went into the corporate world, and it was as difficult as I had imagined, and a little bit as toxic as well as I had anticipated.
Little element of soul sucking energy.
Just a little bit. And in the meantime, he remained in Peru and continued doing trips, and actually built a center down there. And then it was 2015 when I was like at my wit's end with the corporate world, and praying to the universe for a change. And literally like 2 weeks after I started looking for another job, I got an email, and he said he was looking for an operations manager down at his center in Peru. And I was like, okay, like I did ask for a change. I'm going to apply. I'm probably not going to get it, but it was the fastest cover letter I'd ever written in my life. And then I got it. And he was like, do you understand that this means like relocating to the Amazon? And I was like, yes. Do you understand that this means learning Spanish in the next 2 months? I was like, okay, give me these 2 months and I can do it. And so, yeah, that's how the transition happened. And I think really what I learned from that, and especially looking back, is just the difference between acting from a place of what I thought I should do, which was really how my career had happened and my life had happened up until that point, versus actually listening to my intuition and giving that a voice too. And recognizing that it's a dance between our logical and intuitive selves always. But until that moment, I had completely dismissed my intuition in favor of the practical, logical side. And my life has sprung forth from that one moment of listening to my intuition. So
that's great. I mean, it's very reflective of what you're all about with balancing science and these indigenous practices, right? Like the heart and the mind, and how we can be more holistic in our decision making. It's interesting. I understand that the medicine chooses us. And once we embark on that medicine path, our task is to really listen, to learn how to listen to where we're being called. Like, may I be of service is always the question. Like, take me where I'm to be of the best service, and really opening up to that. And it usually doesn't look like anything you think it's going to look like, right?
Absolutely not. And it was a leap of faith on both of our parts. But yeah, truly, it felt like as soon as I said yes, it really felt like the path opened a whole lot smoother than I thought it would, kind of making the transition from America to the Amazon.
Totally. And I found that when we turn away from it, it'll just keep tapping us on the shoulder. Like,
yes. Very persistent.
Are you ready?
My thick head sometimes. It takes a couple rounds.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about clinical versus ceremonial, the two paths of healing, since we kind of started touching on that. There's an increased interest in how psychedelic retreats compare with the clinical psychedelic assisted therapy model. I'm so excited to dive into this because this is really my area too. From your perspective, how do the frameworks, expectations, and outcomes differ between a healing container like Soltara and a Western clinical setting? What assumptions do guests often bring with them that need to be reflected on or even unlearned before true healing can begin?
Oh, I love this question too. Yeah. So at Soltara, we are guided by the Shipibo tradition. And like many indigenous cosmologies, we operate from an animistic framework. So everything is alive and everything is relationship. So in this kind of framework, you're not actually taking a psychedelic, you're actually building a relationship to a plant spirit. And like any relationship, that can take time to build, and it's not transactional and it's not linear either. And so, in order to allow time and space for that relationship to unfold, and also for folks to get into the deeper layers of the work, our minimum retreat length, for example, is 5 nights with 3 ceremonies, and our standard is 7 nights with 4 ceremonies. And then surrounding the ceremony itself is a structured, holistic, and communal container before, during, and after, from intake to integration. So we're really inviting a longer-term relationship to both the medicine and the community. And this is another big difference, I would say, between clinical models and indigenous frameworks. From the relational framework, the community aspect is such a huge part of the healing process. We heal in relationship. I think many of us have heard and know that. And so our programming really balances individual support and emotional processing with interactive group integration circles, community group sharing circles. We actually call them ceremonies because of how much people get out of witnessing others in their authentic vulnerability, right? And being witnessed in their own vulnerability as well. And I think this aspect of a healing retreat is honestly not talked about enough in Western clinical models. And it really builds skills of communication and relational healing and vulnerability and confidence. And so that's one piece. And another lesson that we learned from indigenous frameworks of healing is the ripple effect that this work has on participants, close family, loved ones, and community members back home. So there's this narrative around integration that the hard work starts when you get home, which is true. But one of the reasons given for that is often this idea that you've changed, but you're going back home to the same environment. And so how do you protect your integration? How do you discern who to share with? How do you navigate people who may not understand or may dismiss your experience? How do you, navigate the same triggers in the same environment? It's a very individually focused integration approach. But if we look at indigenous cultures around the world, the close community actually also participates in the journey as well, whether as a sacred witness or holding the larger container. So for example, when someone goes on a vision quest, the family or community holds the prayer and keeps the fire. And this is a process for them too. And so the initiate is not just returning to the same environment after their journey, but one that's ready to receive them differently, who have also had their own journey and perhaps transformation through the process of being a sacred witness. And so at Soltara, we've really integrated these lessons and frameworks by also providing support for the participants' loved ones and their communities. And we've created this entwined community alignment program because, often those closest to the participant are having their own process. I mean, the impact of their partner or family member going through a plant medicine experience ripples out to them as well. And these kind of consequences or ripples range from like the short-term and logistical, who's going to watch the kids in someone's absence, who's going to cover the shifts at work, to like the long-term and esoteric. Will their feelings and priorities change? Will this bring us closer? How's this going to, affect our relationship? A pretty wide spectrum in between. And so we've created this program and pulled from modalities like nonviolent communication, internal family systems, and the traditions of collective-focused indigenous wisdom keepers, such as the Shipibo, Lakota, and Yawanawa. And it has information and tools and conversation prompts with a flow that kind of takes participants and their loved ones from intake to integration, and even ways to incorporate their children if they feel like they want to have better tools to communicate about it. And so really our hope is to move from individually focused integration and retreat experience to a more collective and community framework, because that is the true reality of each person's experience, that this work will necessarily impact their close circle in some way, shape, or form. And
Wow.
Pause there, but I have the assumptions to be unlearned. Some notes about that.
Yeah. Let pause there for just a second, because I want to double click this. I love that you said IFS. So I just wrote the textbook with Dick Schwartz on IFS and psychedelics. That's coming out next year with Dave Lovis and Martha Sweezy. I'm really excited about that. Yeah. And IFS is such a beautiful model to use. One of the ways that I've incorporated it that totally resonates with what you're talking about is this idea of within, between, and beyond. So within is our internal ecosystem of parts. Between is interrelationally with our close relationships, and then beyond into the larger system. And that when we do plant medicine work or any psychedelic medicine work, we're working on all three of those levels simultaneously. So to your point, when you look at indigenous cultures, people didn't go into a doctor's office separate from everyone and have this one-on-one individual psychedelic journey and then go back to a community that didn't understand what happened. It's this whole community that's going through this, and the witnessing and the mirroring and what we call the islands of coherence in our, in my system, that where you come back to a coherence that reinforces the changes that you've made, because everybody's making those changes together, right? So I love the thoughtfulness in what you're creating, that you're thinking about all of these different ecosystems and how to support that change, because that is how we're going to get durable change from these experiences. I mean, once you know, you can't unknow. You see this stuff, you have these mystical experiences, and you can't unknow that. But if you go back to a system that doesn't reinforce that then becomes exiled into your system, because there's nowhere for that to go. Mm-hmm. So it's very important that we curate environments where this can expand and we can continue learning together and reinforcing each other in that growth, which is the beautiful Shipibo, the Quechua. They have systems that can work with that, right? Including not only humans, but also including the plants and the animals.
All of the stakeholders, right, in this ecosystem, and
that's right,
humans and more than humans. Exactly. That was so well said. And truly, it's not a new idea. We're just really trying to learn from the people that have been doing this for a lot longer, and then attuning it to the sort of modern Western psyche and physiology that is present in the people.
Which is that translation into the Western medical model, right? Like how do we bridge? Were you at MAPS this year at the conference? It was so interesting to see the bifurcation of those different worlds, and how like the places where they were interconnecting and working through. That was so beautiful to me, right? There was a lot more presence of the indigenous voice this year than in 23. Which was refreshing, right? Yeah.
I was absolutely. I even wrote a piece that I'll maybe publish at some point about fractured medicine from the 2023 psychedelic science, because it did feel like there was a lot of different, tracks and lanes. And of course, necessarily you have to organize the tracks in some way. But I was excited to see a lot more crosstalk between different tracks, and that some of the tracks were also a little bit more like mixing modalities and weaving in different voices in the same panel. And I felt like, okay, we are maybe actually integrating some of these lessons over the years in a larger way.
This is really the time of bridge makers, right? Like we need to bridge these two worlds. We're at the cusp of a huge shift globally, and we need to bridge make so that we can translate the old to the new, what's coming. And the new is someone named the conference this year as a confluence, psychedelic confluence, instead of psychedelic science, or that there's a confluence that's happening with all of these different threads of the tapestry that we're weaving together, and that is really where we're going, right?
Amazing. Yes. And I mean, we're doing some really fascinating scientific studies right now of even trying to reframe what the Western medical model might say as adverse effects of like purging and, temperature changes and shaking and vomiting, all of these things that the Western medical model considers adverse effects. And it's like, but actually, how does the level and intensity of purging and the level of challenging experience translate to positive therapeutic outcomes? Let's maybe talk about this like a feature, not a bug, and actually reframe the conversation, because that is so much of this work, right? Of like root cause healing, really addressing, but sometimes that means feeling worse before you feel better. And that's hard for the Western model to kind of integrate. But I think if we speak both languages, we can really make some progress there.
So much of the Western medical model is alleviating any discomfort and just dissociating from discomfort. Right. And when we realize, I remember talking to a medicine person who was saying, we need more bitter foods. We need more the bitter roots and the dark green vegetables, because that's where all the important medicine is, So sometimes you have to take a bitter pill, a bitter drink, do some purging, because that is all part of the healing process. It's not about dissociating and getting away from, but really stepping into and working through, right? Working through the shadow.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And really learning to sit with that discomfort as part of the process and being okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's, from the jungle out into the world, Soltara's integrative model. So you're cited as a leading example of cross-cultural integration in retreat settings. And for those unfamiliar, can you share how your programming honors Indigenous Shipibo healing traditions while supporting guests with trauma-informed, science-based preparation and integration? So share with us what a full journey at Soltara would actually look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you mentioned, we're really trying to bridge worlds and paradigms here. And that is certainly a nuanced line to walk, as we want to ensure participant safety and the ability to meet them where they are and properly support the often Western psyche and trauma that comes from Western society, while also honoring and being guided by the Shipibo tradition. And so trying to find that balance in our preparation, programming, facilitation style, communication, so that it serves both the integrity of the Shipibo lineage and the healing processes of our guests. So we collaborate with our Shipibo maestros, as well as Western psychologists and medical advisors who also have deep Shipibo plant medicine experience, and trauma-informed facilitators, and actually even local Costa Rican doctors. And so the overarching approach is that when it comes to the ceremony itself, the plant treatments, and the energetic work, this is all led and held by the Shipibo maestros that we work with. And then the support system surrounding that, the preparation, programming, and facilitation that I mentioned, are informed by Western psychology and a nervous system understanding of the physiology of trauma and other modern and holistic healing modalities. So all of our facilitators have walked in both worlds. All of our programming is designed to support and not interfere with the energetic work of the maestros. So we don't have any other psychedelic medicines or traditions outside of ayahuasca and the Shipibo tradition. We don't have any other energy work or consciousness altering practices besides the ceremony themselves. And so really allowing people to dig 1 6-foot hole rather than 6 1-foot holes and build that deeper relationship to the medicine and the tradition. And we also support that relationship building and continuity of care by working with the same medicine brew and the same maestros for the entire experience. So to kind of give a picture of the Soltara journey, once a participant registers, they'll go through our intake process, which looks at their relevant medical and psychological history, any medications or diagnoses, as well as a holistic picture of their intentions for joining, their support systems back home, what they're coming in with in terms of trauma to work through, or their desires to connect more deeply with themselves or their life. And in this process, a psychotherapist will review their form, consult with a medical advisor if needed, and have an intake call to speak with the guests, review it together, answer any questions they may have, and help prepare them, as well as an informed consent and safety waiver. And then once they're confirmed through the intake process, they will receive a full year of free access to the paid tier of our online community platform to support their preparation and integration. So this platform has community spaces for question, sharing, and connection, retreat information, logistics, holistic resources for kind of physical, mental, therapeutic, relational, cultural support, regular monthly events, including preparation and integration circles with a Soltara therapist, guided self-paced experiences for yoga and breathwork, online courses as well for deeper exploration, our Entwined program, and also a carefully vetted network of practitioners, coaches, and guides for individual support. So that's kind of the preparation intake phase. And then we have all guests arrive to an airport hotel in San Jose, and we offer free group shuttle to and from our retreat locations. Both are in Costa Rica. We offer the 5-night retreats, 7-night retreats, or 12-night retreats. And the program varies slightly between the different lengths, but they all include health checks with a local doctor at our on-site medical clinic before the first and after the last ceremony, orientation, introduction to ayahuasca workshops, consultations with our Shipibo maestros, plant treatments like vomitivo and medicinal flower baths, ceremonies and integration workshops, yoga, meditation, some light breath work, not too intense, all ayahuasca-friendly meals and different accommodation options. And we also try and balance programming with a lot of spaciousness and time for rest and nature immersion. We have a beach here in Playa Blanca at Goddess Falls. There's a beautiful waterfall at our Holos venue. And then, integration support consists of that same year of online community and resources, as well as kind of 3 months of weekly resources where we're following up that kind of tracks the arc of integration. So, for example, 2 weeks out, your kind of post-retreat dieta is, ending, and you can start to introduce different foods. But like, what does it look like to check in with your body as you slowly introduce new foods? So, of course, every journey is unique, but we have kind of like an arc that supports people. And then we also provide an integration journal with beautiful art and self-guided tools, and then opportunities for one-on-one or small group therapeutic support as well in this 6-week program called Living Wisdom.
Wow. So comprehensive. I love that. How large are your cohorts? Do you have like limits of size with your cohorts?
Yeah. So our maximum capacity is 20 to 22 guests, depending on location. And so for that, we work with 2 Shipibo maestros, 3 facilitators, 1 assistant facilitator, 1 retreat director, and a yoga teacher is kind of like the medicine team. And then there's, of course, before and after. And there's actually more than a 1-to-1 ratio of staff to guests when you kind of consider all of it. But we find that size is really nice because it allows it's like big enough that everyone can find someone to connect with, but still small enough that everyone can witness everyone and, really ensure that they are making that like kind of group connection, but having that time for individual work as well.
Yeah, that's a great number for retreat group size. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about reciprocity in action, ethics, economics, and regeneration. You've been outspoken about the need for ethical entrepreneurship and sacred reciprocity. Soltara reinvests profits into community initiatives and works closely with Indigenous partners. What does a regenerative retreat model really look like in practice? And how does it influence your decision-making around things like guest capacity, which we just touched on, healer compensation, and land stewardship?
Yeah, I love this question so much. One of Soltara's pillars and focuses is integration, right? And this kind of naturally begs the question, how are we as an organization also integrating the wisdom and lessons from the medicine and the traditions that we're stewarding? I often share that my work is my healing and the integration of my healing is my work. This is like a very cyclical, you probably relate. So it's a cyclical framework that really mirrors this shift from linear models that I think we're all really starting to push back on, that are often used in business and capitalism and even in the way that many people think of healing. And as we know, Indigenous frameworks really reorient us to this cyclical nature of life and the regenerative nature of healing and evolution. So, we're not building for infinite linear growth. We're composting what's no longer needed, and we're feeding the systems that we're a part of. And so instead of extracting profit or content from Indigenous traditions, we're asking, what are the frameworks they carry that we can learn from? What does it look like to build businesses and alliances and healing models around reciprocity and collaboration and regeneration, accounting for all of the ecosystems, to use your word, I love that we're a part of? And as we talked before, the Shipibo maestros remind us, like, the stakeholders also include plants and the animals and the earth. And so for us, that looks like participating in the ecosystem of our local Playa Blanca community in Costa Rica or Diamante Valley. So here, this is our kind of original location. We're donating to the local schools, to the municipality. We're doing beach cleanups. We're planting trees. We also really take care of our team. We're making sure that we're paying people well, that, we have 5 different healing teams that rotate through our 2 centers. So they end up working for 3 to 6 months per year, but that's enough to sustain them for the rest of the year. So, they can go and do diets or just rest or, just be with their families. So we're part of our local community contexts. We're also part of the Nicoya Peninsula over here in Playa Blanca. So how that looks is really being in right relationship with our regional director and the Ministry of Health, working and dialoguing with authorities and, understanding that we have the same goals. We're trying to keep people safe in this work. We have really done a lot of work to be as above board as possible. Our regional director knows the work that we're doing. We have a local Costa Rican doctor who has been working with us for years now. And he's like, I'm really seeing the changes in people before and after the retreat. And, the ecosystem of Costa Rica, we're in collaboration with ICERs, as well as this national alliance that we're building of medicine centers. You shared a little bit in the bio, so I won't go into that, but we did just complete a study with the University of Costa Rica on a socioeconomic study of how many families we're employing as a community of ayahuasca centers, how much money we're bringing into Costa Rica, how much land we have conserved collectively, which is actually more than the largest national park here in Costa Rica, which was a really
incredible
really cool finding.
That's really, really important, right? And this preemptive collaboration with the local government and a country that's so tourism based to help them understand how much that's bringing to the whole system. That's beautiful. I love hearing
exactly. That. Yeah. And so trying to be as above board as possible and, also in being in collaboration with other medicine centers here, how can we shift this framework of collaboration over competition? And then another ecosystem, of course, is the Shipibo Maestros in the Amazon. And so really supporting the Shipibo-led initiatives and also Amazon conservation and rainforest protection and indigenous rights in that realm. So the different collaborations that we have and really trying to make things a win-win-win situation. I think capitalism really trains us to see others as competition and this sort of zero-sum game where one has to lose for another to win. But Indigenous frameworks in business practices, in alliances and collaborations really show us that regenerative abundance can come from shared resources, mutual support, genuine community, and collective integrity.
Absolutely. I'm so happy that you're a presence in Costa Rica. That's so beautiful. Okay, so let's talk about the new psychedelic seeker evolving client needs. We've been through a total reckoning recently in the psychedelic world. It's been amazing. I've been involved in psychedelics for decades, and it's been fascinating to go from this is your brain on drugs, like eggs frying in a pan, to this crazy excitement, like Wild West rock star years of psychedelics, and then to this kind of the stalwarts that are really here to stay and what are we taking from that? It's been such a journey, right? Goodness. So, let's talk about, and then just in the larger collective, the pandemic, societal upheaval, we're in a really interesting time globally as well. So how has this affected the people that are coming to, receive medicine? And how is this affecting your retreats? And what patterns are you seeing around grief, disconnection, and existential fatigue? This is something I'm seeing in my trauma practice all the time, every day, is just this incredible fatigue that's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is really important to acknowledge our own cultural context that we all know contributes to these complexities, and that the health of the individual is so reflective of the health of the collective. And as you said, we're not well right now, and we're seeing it manifesting in different ways in our individual bodies. And so one thing is that there has been over the years, especially since COVID, more complexity of physical and mental health, more complex trauma, more chronic nervous system dysregulation, more medications, more comorbidities, more complex diagnoses, especially autoimmune. And then also more mental health challenges. So, this isolation, loneliness, a lack of genuine community, more existential angst, this disconnection to self, others, nature, this collective grief that we don't have the proper frameworks to support in Western culture, or this lack of clarity or purpose. And, we see a lot of people come of really trying to find what is my path? Help me open my path. There's also a lot more urgency that this is sort of this last hope or nothing else has worked, and people are desperate, understandably, for real solutions and change. And we actually have to really manage expectations in this regard so as to not do more harm than good in our intake process. It is a bit of a flag for us if someone says, like, this is my last hope, right? Because we want to make sure that people are understanding, like, this isn't a panacea and this isn't going to immediately solve all of your problems. And so we don't want to do more harm than good in this work. And at the same time, especially in recent years, I think that the genuine seeker is also much more aware of the extractive and colonialist systems that cause harm in relationship to this work, especially with plant medicines and indigenous peoples. So they want to do this work with intention and respect. They want to find real community. They want to connect and journey with places that are in right relationship with the tradition, land, and cultures that they're stewarding. And so, there's this beautiful golden nugget, I think, at the heart of all of this that really calls us all forward as practitioners and providers and stewards to be aware of the larger context of our sick society, and that we're engaging with that responsibility in how we operate and relate to the ecosystems that we're a part of. And in terms of who's getting left out, especially when it's medical things, one way that we've offered, this work isn't just about the ayahuasca medicine itself. It is the community and the container. It's actually the icaros, the healing songs during ceremony, that are the main conduit of the healing work done. So often we'll have people come and not drink the medicine, but come and receive the icaros and the energetic work from the maestros, and be in community and eat good food and connect to nature. I mean, so much of the medicine wheel is so much more than just the medicine itself. And I think having that opportunity to work with indigenous maestros in that way, which is how it was done in the past as well, is a beautiful opportunity to still allow people who maybe have these more complex issues to be able to do this work.
I so appreciate it. There's so many facets of the healing container that are as powerful as the medicine. As Westerners, we tend to really over-focus on the molecules and not enough on the whole container. And, you touched on community. That's what I see, is that people are so starved for community that's one of the most powerful healing elements of these retreats, is just having a deep in-person connection with other humans and deep witnessing with other humans. So powerful, right?
Honestly.
And, appreciating what you said about this, people coming with, through the IFS lens, I see it as like these parts, this protector that's like, this is my last hope. And inevitably, I'll find that there's a polarization internally of a part that's really terrified of losing all of these protector systems that they've developed in order to survive. And it's always telling when people come in and say, they've read Michael Pollan's book, and it's like, okay, I'm going to do this one journey and it's going to, solve everything for me. And then inevitably there's a protector there that's really terrified of losing its job in how it's been managing all of this material for all of this time that's so painful to look at. And so really slowing down and taking time to engage with that protector system, those parts, to make sure that all of those parts are on board and getting consent before going into deep medicine work is, I think, really imperative as practitioners, right? As we're doing the vetting and the intakes for folks.
Absolutely. That's the preparation and the mindset that's like so important. And, and the beautiful and kind of mysterious thing about psychedelic and plant medicine work is it's so much of it is actually like reactivating your own agency. And that can be challenging for people. And also I think it's so empowering, and you only get out of it what you put in, right? And so if you're not ready for this work, or you are feeling this sense of like desperation and, that this is, you're pinning all of your expectations on it, all of that plays into the medicine experience. And it's not just like taking a pill and having some sort of chemical reaction, right? And so really looking at things holistically. And I think, speaking to that, it's really powerful when we can weave in these different psychological systems of knowledge and ways of knowing into these indigenous frameworks, because they can really support people in understanding themselves at such a level where they actually can consciously, with agency, make that choice to change. And ultimately, it is ultimately their choice.
I love the indigenous perspective, where you're collaborating with this medicine, you're inviting it in, and it's not something that's happening to you, where you're just passive and you're taking something that's doing something to you. That you are rising to meet the medicine. You're right, the Icaros that are around you. You're rising to sing and to join in, and it's a participation. It's not a passive engagement, and that's really new for people to be engaged with their own healing.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. And I think overall and this was kind of a part of what my thoughts about, like, what do people have to unlearn? It is really about orienting people away from that reductionist framework, that over approach on the psychoactive molecule, to like that just recreates these sort of extractionist and reductionist approach to healing, and towards a more holistic and relational understanding. And this is like the perfect foundation for that.
That's great. Okay, so let's talk about cultural humility in practice. There's a growing conversation about cultural appropriation versus collaboration in psychedelic spaces. So how do you and the Soltara team approach working across cultures, particularly with Indigenous wisdom holders, in ways that are rooted in mutual respect, accountability, and co-creation? What tensions or ethical challenges have you encountered, and how do you navigate them?
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. So, this is a living question for us that has many ongoing manifestations in our day-to-day and across every aspect of our work. We don't just bring the medicine and the maestros into our container. We actually bring ourselves into theirs. And this requires constant dialogue and constant listening. And, I think I've shared some of the ways in that we collaborate, but really ensuring that we're not mixing different medicines and traditions within one container. We are also collaborating with them on our surrounding approaches to ensure that it's supportive and not contraindicated with their work. We're only working with Indigenous Shipibo healers because, of course, they're the true masters of their craft, and also so that they and their families can directly benefit from Soltara's work. We also support their families and communities through our Reciprocity Fund, which has funded several Shipibo-led projects like a Shipibo school for Shipibo children, medical funds for health-related issues, relocation and medicine food for 3 of our maestros in their communities when, I don't know if you heard, but the Ucayali region had some very severe flooding earlier this year, and it actually caused some of them to lose their home, which was really sad, but we were able to help them relocate and get them needed like food and medicine for people. We're also only working with Western facilitators, therapists, and medical advisors who also have extensive experience within the Shipibo tradition. And, as kind of discussed, like applying the lessons from this framework, from their frameworks into our programming and support structures. So another example is that our intake process doesn't just look at like medication timelines, but really takes this more holistic approach to also include the energetic interference of certain substances and foods in line with the guidelines of the maestros. To speak to some challenges that come up in this work, because I think this is really important. This can be very challenging. I think that the first thing is that there is this layer of cultural translation that we're navigating all of the time. I mean, it's Indigenous cosmologies meets Western psychologies. And, how do we honor the reality, for example, that shamanic attacks or darker energies and entities are a part of this worldview without creating unnecessary fear or even potentially harm for participants unfamiliar with this worldview? So just like a very small example is like during a consultation with a maestro, if they say like, you have like dark energies attached to you, like we might actually translate that to say heavy energies if, we understand that this worldview is not going to be necessarily supportive to the guest that's, part of the circle. But really, it's like this question of how do we translate some aspects of the culture in a way that truly serves and supports the participants' healing without sanitizing the work or worldview, and just like holding that nuance very close to ourselves throughout the entire process. It is a living question that also involves the individual participants' process. So it's not necessarily this like one size fits all situation. Another challenge or example is the ceremony structure. So, we work with 5 different Shipibo healing teams of 2 maestros each. Each maestro may have a different way of working within their community and at home, but we want to make sure that every participant gets a healing song and Icaro from each healer every ceremony as part of our kind of personalized and individual support. So collaborating with them on this structure to really ensure consistency and continuity of care, even though it might not be exactly how they work at home. And then I'd say like a third example that's also a living question for us is this balance of pricing and accessibility. So how do we balance paying our people well and ensuring the sustainability and regenerative potential of the organization? You know, our healers are using this money to support their families and communities and their projects. And we want to contribute to all of these reciprocity projects in our local and global contexts. And we also want to keep pricing accessible. And, you know, how do we balance this? And so we have partial and full scholarships. We offer payment plans. We also have a very wide spread of pricing options depending on program and accommodation choice. And then also we've just launched a collaboration with nonprofit Thank You Life to help fund our programs for those who may not have the financial means to do so. So yeah, overall, we're always learning and we're always asking how we can do better. It's not really a box that we check, but it is this like living dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a complicated ongoing process, right, to navigate these different worlds. And yeah, I appreciate that you're open to learning and changing and growing, right? If we could all do that, I think we'd have a much better world.
Definitely keeping it humble. It's definitely a humbling practice for
Totally,
sure.
Totally. Okay, Melissa, can you talk to us about how to choose a retreat? What would you ask before you go? There's so many retreat options. And it's overwhelming for people. People don't know where to start. So from your unique vantage point, what are the top questions that people should be asking themselves and the retreat center before saying yes? And what are some red flags that you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a lot, so I'll try and sum it up. I would say one is, you know, who are the healers or practitioners holding ceremony? What is their backgrounds, which of course may look different depending on the medicine and tradition. Looking at their lineage, where and how long and with whom they've trained, how long they've been holding ceremony, who are the facilitators and ceremony assistants, and what is their experience? Are they trauma informed? Are they trauma aware? Are they trauma centered? Kind of what's their level of training in that realm? What experience has brought them to this work? What experience do they have holding space for others? How is the medicine made and sourced? What are the ingredients, and are there any admixtures? And if so, why? So at Soltara, you know, we source it sustainably from within Costa Rica and only use ayahuasca and chacruna, but other places might add more admixtures, and it'd be good to know the reason for that if they do. Also, trusted sources and brewers matter here, because whoever makes it necessarily means that their energetics will be a part of the brew. What is the ratio between healers, facilitators, and group size? This can vary somewhat and is kind of dependent on the experience of the healers, but and also the tradition. And then you might also want to consider the balance of women and men on your healing team. What does the intake process and preparation support look like? We all know that psychedelics and plant medicines are not for everyone, and there are things that are contraindicated. Is there an advisory board, or is there advisors in the medical and psychological screening process? What kind of preparation support? Is it holistic, physical, energetic, mental, spiritual, cultural education as well? Are there other psychoactive medicines or consciousness altering practices offered on retreat? And so that is part of being trauma informed, being aware of kind of the too much, too fast, too soon when it comes to the nervous system. So if there are, it's not that it's wrong to have these things mixed together, but is there space between the medicines, between the ceremonies? Is there integrations? Just really weighing the benefits and risks, and considering also the cultural context and mixing of different traditions as well. What medical resources, emergency and on-site safety protocols are in place, what integration support is offered for the experience, and is the center engaged in reciprocity? I think everyone wants to participate in centers that give back as well. So that's always a question worth asking. Some red flags, I would say, are if centers or places or people are promising certain outcomes, guaranteeing transformational results, or sensationalizing as if this is a panacea. Again, just being aware of medicine stacking, whether there is or isn't an intake process, lack of reciprocity or integration support. And then one other thing that I think it's just interesting to me, I see these words like authentic and traditional used a lot in sort of marketing materials. And I think that those words kind of lack any real meaning, or maybe don't fully like, what is authentic? Like, what does that even mean, right? These cultures are living, they're alive, they're constantly changing and, meeting the moments as well. And so, things like traditional and authentic, I'm always a little bit like aware of when they say like guided by a tradition is different than like we're a traditional ceremony, but traditional ceremony probably doesn't have a facilitator. So, just really understanding where that's coming from as well.
That's great. I would add, if I may, because I talk to a lot of people who have a trauma background, is to really be cognizant of if this person that's going to be facilitating with you has the energy of giving power back to you, like this understanding that it's not like you have to give your power away to someone else to heal, but the whole energy of the retreat center and the people that you're engaging with really, really encourage the idea that you have the power within you to heal, and that we're midwifing the healing for you to be the best you can be, instead of I'm going to this place giving my power away to become someone different.
Yes.
I think that's such a big red flag in the language of the website, the people that you're engaging with. Mm-hmm. Is that the energy of, that you have this healing wisdom within you, and we're midwifing that.
Yeah. And we're mirrors. We're mirrors to help you activate the answers you already have inside of you. That is.
Would you agree with that?
100%. And that's our facilitation approach. Like, we're not gurus. We don't have the answers. We are humans. We are helping to reflect you.
Right.
And mostly it's asking questions and getting out of the way, actually.
That's right. That's right. And that's part of that reciprocity, that larger narrative that we're all in this together. No one's above anybody else. Mm-hmm. We're here facilitating one another. What did Ram Dass said, we're all walking each other home. It's like very much the energy of that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And it's humble, and that's the best. It works. We know that, again, reactivating our own agency in this healing. It's really what it's all about.
Yeah. Wow. What an amazing hour to spend with you, Melissa. I learned so much, and it's so beautiful to hear what you've created and what you continue to create. I feel really honored to have spent this hour with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you as well for the work that you're doing. And I hope that our paths can cross in person sometime.
Absolutely. They absolutely will. Can you tell us how people can learn more about Soltara and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is soltara.co, SOLTARA, at Soltara Healing Center on Instagram and Facebook, and at Soltara on YouTube.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Sunny. Thanks.